Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is Carole Hooven, who is the co-director and lecturer at Harvard University's Department of Evolutionary Biology. Last summer, to be more precise, she published this book called T, The Story of Testosterone, the hormone that, something D's us, dominates and divides us. Yeah, that was the D I was thinking about. And in this conversation, we talk about testosterone, we talk about masculinity, femininity, toxicity, and cars. She's a wonderful guest, and it was an absolute pleasure to have her on. So without further ado, here is Carole Hooven in Conversation. I had a masculine confession I wanted to start with, though.
Okay.
So I was driving
Wait, first, can you define what a masculine confession is in your view?
I think the content will define the category.
Okay. Sorry, I'm turning off my mail. I forgot to do. I don't know.
You can tell me if this is a not masculine confession. It was very startlingly masculine, and I didn't expect this to happen to me.
Okay.
So I was driving down the road. There's this long road that connects one part of the outskirts of the city to the skirts of the city, or maybe the what's right under the skirt. I always get confused with
Oh, Jesus.
layers.
It's already becoming a masculine something or other. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
No, slip? We're not in like 1930.
Okay. But it's a long stretch of road, and the posted speed limit's 35, but everybody goes 50 on it because there's nothing there other than some sort of like pseudo or quasi environmental gardening thing that goes with a lot of that bark chips and like weird kind of shrubs.
Well, is it a residential area?
There's nothing there. There's a discount mattress store if you want to get like a secondhand bouncy thing for your playtimes, but other than that, it's just a road, and there's the actual not a farmer's market, but there's this little grocery store. So I'm going through there, and there's also this intersection, which is just a really stupid intersection because the light turns red when people want to turn right. So like everybody has to stop so one person can turn right. So I'm going up this long hill. I'm in my little tiny Yaris that my mom gave me, this little white Yaris, and the light turns yellow, and I just kind of slide through it because it's not red, And this guy's waiting to turn, and then he just guns after me for like this 2-mile stretch of road, and he's just gunning after me, and he's right.
Wait, sorry. Can you say again exactly what you did wrong to piss him off, or what you did to piss him off?
I went through that yellow, and I was going probably 40.
But what did that prevent him from doing?
He just was going to turn right, and it's 2 lanes too, so he could have turned. So he guns after me. We get to the stoplight, and he just starts yelling at me. Well, not yelling at me. It was kind of passive aggressive. He's just like clenching his steering wheel, and he's like, "Let's just go faster and die. Let's all just die and drive fast." And he's just yelling. I'm like, "Whoa, this is really crazy."
Oh, okay. So you just violated a rule that was important to him. Or a law. Yeah. Well, not even a law. You're allowed to go through a yellow light, but it's maybe not a good idea. He thought you were being reckless.
Yes.
So he decided to follow you and potentially challenge you.
And I get to my appointment. I remember it was an appointment because I had to do a drug. I get randomly assigned drug tests because this YouTube business, you have to stay clean or else they won't.
Wait, what?
I'm totally kidding. I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. I'm a little gullible, I guess. What do you? Well, now you have to say why you're getting. Were you really getting?
Well, no. My other job, my blue collar job, it deals in transportation. I transport sentient cargo twice a day to and from where they become more.
Okay, you'll have to tell us about that later.
Yeah. So anyway, so I get to I'm almost done with my masculine confession. Maybe it's not masculine. You can decide. And I'm sitting there, and like all that adrenaline's, I'm sitting there waiting for to go pee into a cup, and all that adrenaline's just going through me. I'm like, oh man, this just doesn't feel good. Like, I don't like this. I don't like this. And then I just got really I just got fed up with it. I'm like, you know what? I want a sports car. I don't even care if I go fast. I want to look fast. And I became totally obsessed with sports cars. And over the last 6 months, I've learned everything I can about how combustion engines work and limited lip differentials and transmissions and stuff. And
do you watch the videos that review various cars? Like there's this great British one. Now I can't remember what it's called.
The British guy.
So you're really doing research. You're watching the reviews. You're reading. I went through the same process for like 6 months, and I loved it. It's a fascinating process because you really start to think about what particular elements of the car are appealing and why you value certain elements over others, like handling versus what you're signaling to somebody else, versus safety, right? And you have to sort of choose those elements. I think it's really an interesting process. So I enjoyed that.
What sparked
process.
Your
it's very addictive.
Your addictive automotive?
We just had to buy a new car.
Oh, okay.
And it's a major purchase, and I do research. So when I'm confronted with any big question, I just want to dive into it and get as much information as possible. And I get addicted to that. And I went down a rabbit hole with the car research. I couldn't believe how much I was enjoying it, and how interesting it is, because you really have to think about your psychology in a way that I hadn't thought about. So you're looking. It sounds like you're driven by a need to signal to other men that you're in control, powerful, wealthy, or what would you
just like speedy, just like. So I ended up. It'll be here next week. It's this tiny little.
You're getting it. You made a decision.
It's the weirdest thing.
Can you say what you're getting? Or
it's a Toyota GR86, and it's this tiny light little
that sounds
sports
very
car.
Specialized. Okay.
Yeah, and they partnered with Subaru to make this little thing.
Yeah.
And it's rather affordable.
So it's like a 2-seater, or
it's technically a 4-seater, but you'd have to saw off your friend's legs if you wanted to drive around with more than one of them at a time. It's
okay. And so it's just, I test drove a few cars like that, and it was a blast. But I felt like, I have a kid, first of all.
Okay. What did you end up?
Well, we ended up getting a Volvo V60, which had the right I love the car. It had the perfect combination of traits for our needs. But I think if when I was younger, I had a little sportier cars. But it's interesting that right after that interaction, you had this desire. That's the piece that's missing here, is for you to explain that relationship.
The relationship
between your interaction with this guy and your desire to get this specific kind of car. And I'm curious why those specific, why speed and handling became so important to you. Yeah. Is it just because it sounds like it's not because you really enjoy, or is it because you really enjoy that part of driving and that's important to you? Or is it more about like what you're signaling?
I don't think it's what I'm signaling, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's more about having a lot of control and feeling connected to the road and feeling connected to the driving experience. Because I've been, after I graduated from the Evergreen State College, this YouTube thing started happening, and I needed another job because this YouTube thing could stop happening at any moment. And I started doing transportation work. So I had to start thinking about the road and the handling and stuff. But that I just want to...
I see. So you do a lot of driving. Yeah. That's part in your personal car, not in a car that's associated with the company or whatever it is.
It's a government entity or something that's very close to a government entity. But no, I they're just down the road too. I mean, I just work locally, and I'm connected with this community, and I just transport the offspring of this little peninsula back and forth to...
Sorry, what do you mean by offspring of the little peninsula?
Okay, so if people don't sink their entire sexuality in pornographic media, they can end up having a pair bond and then producing offspring, and then those offspring need to be handled, like trained to be like smart.
Wait, they can produce offspring even if they do sink most of their time into pornography. Plenty of dads
regardless
watch a shitload of pornography.
Wait, what?
Okay, anyway, I said plenty of dads watch a shitload of pornography. I'm saying those two things aren't totally incompatible.
Exclusive. Yeah,
Exclusive,
that was a bad joke, but I'm speaking with a scientist.
Oh, sorry. I keep missing your jokes. That's something that I actually do in general. It's not you. I take things too literally. So
okay.
Sorry.
I just wonder if that's an evolutionary trait. Okay, literalism. Sorry. Hold on.
So you're transporting your
no.
Your
okay, so
you don't have
I drive a school I drive a school bus. Big yellow thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no.
Do you talk about this much on your show here?
Every once in a while it comes up, but
wow.
Yeah,
that must be an interesting.
It's
job.
perfect.
How old are the kids?
Kindergarten through 8th grade.
Whoa. What do they call you?
Benjamin or bus driver or Mr. Bus Driver. They don't really call me anything. They call me Benjamin when they need my attention. Yeah.
You must really get to know them.
Yeah, within that window, to and from, I get to know them.
Okay.
I mean, the 8th graders are kind of like sullen and on their phones and, like, have a good day. One girl every day, hi, like, have a good night, have a good night.
Yeah.
But the problem is they all have these masks on, so I don't really. There's a disconnect because of that. But
oh, right.
The younger kids are more open. I can connect with them.
Yeah.
It's
okay. So about the masculine confession, why did you? I'm not sure why you frame this as a masculine confession.
Well, I was just thinking about that in relationship to T. The story of testosterone, the hormone that dominates and divides.
Thank you.
Defines.
That's the book. Divides.
Excellent cover, by the way. You lucked out on this.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
no, I did the initial design for that.
Oh, no way.
And then sent it. Yeah. Wait, is that right? No, sorry. I think that's right.
It was a while ago,
I'm pretty sure I did. It was a little, year and a half ago or something. I mean, the cover was designed, but it just came out Horton. Like 6 months ago.
Yeah. Anyways, so I was just thinking in relationship to that was the most masculine thing that's happened to me in a while. But I guess
you've grown a beard.
Well, no, I have grown a beard. I have a little bit of a neck beard that I'm trying to hide because that's a incel signal. I don't want to signal to people.
The neck beard?
I don't know.
Okay. Is that a joke?
I just been letting it. They call them neck beards. I think they call like certain troglodyte males are referred to as neck beards. It's like kind of like the masculine form of mouth breathing, I guess. Not having like a clear shelf underneath your jaw. I don't know. But I'm trying to tuck it all. Post it out.
Yeah, no, I think I don't have data. I don't have clear data, but anecdotally, I would say that, more men than women are buying sports cars.
Yeah. Well, all the videos, pretty much
picture men.
Dudes. Well, there's a couple
they're marketed at dudes. But there must be hot women leaning on the cars or something.
I did find some just today. I found, because every day I look at YouTube to see if any more footage, because it's a brand new car. It's not even really released yet. So there was in Thailand, there were some girls, Model E girls with excess exposure,
large breasts.
Yeah.
No, so I guess the idea is that this is, if you drive this car, you will be able to.
But it doesn't seem that I think it's
with large breasts.
It seems that sort of media is kind of gone by the wayside. It doesn't seem like sexuality in cars, at least on YouTube. But I'm just watching these YouTube videos. They're just these bros that go out and just drive these cars and tell you everything that
and they're really into it.
Yeah, and they just know so much about it.
Yeah, no, I think I don't really see that as a masculine confession personally, because I can just see the appeal of that kind of car. If you like driving, if you're in a car a lot, if it's fun, if you get off on the handling, etc. If you were married and had kids and were having some sort of midlife crisis, that might be a different
Yeah. Okay.
situation.
Yeah. So I would have to get married, have kids, and then be 2 years older than I am now for this to be a masculine confession.
Well, how old are you now?
45.
No, like
when's
10
midlife?
years.
Oh, really? 55.
Well, I'm 55. So 45 can't be midlife. Jesus Christ.
Oh, gee. Okay. You just wanted to keep on going. Okay. That's fine. Every 10 years I try to have a midlife crisis just to hedge my bets. You never know when it's going to happen. So, you've done a lot of these interviews on this book. You were on Rogan, right, this summer? I remember that.
That was my very first podcast, my very first time talking publicly about the book. I hardly, I was a total nobody before that. And then the first thing I got was Rogan, and I went through media training. I was so nervous about, this was with the UK, wanted me to have media training because their media are a little more kind of gotcha. But they've been basically fine, but they wanted to prepare me for how not to get all caught up in the questions and to control the, narrative and kind of answer whatever question I wanted to answer. So that helped to some extent, but then I just kind of said, fuck it, I'm going to just be myself. And so Joe, they flew me out there first class. He gets a lot of crap, but he was amazing. Like he was, I cried like 5 times on that show, but he was just made me feel so comfortable. And I had a beer. I was drinking a beer out of that mug there, and he drank like whiskey or I don't know what. But that was weird to have that be my very first. Yeah,
that's kind of like
podcast. And it was way before the book came out. So that was too bad because I keep wishing like that could have coincided with the book, but I should not complain at all about that.
And when did the book actually get published then? Was it in
July?
August? Oh, July. Okay.
July. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you've been speaking about it on and off, or doing these talks about it, and so,
the pace is slowing down. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So and the bouncy ball is kind of do.
Yeah.
A little bit. Okay. Is there things that you haven't gotten into with it yet? Territory that hasn't been explored or expounded on?
Well, the book, there's a lot of science, like real science in the book, a lot of biology.
Mechanisms.
I love that stuff, and I try to make that fun and engaging and, palatable. So I haven't really, that's the stuff that people really don't want to hear about, the sort of more detailed stuff. And that's fine. I guess I was talking to you earlier about, this idea of toxic masculinity. And what has happened, I think, as I've gone through this course of these discussions, is I had an intuition about that concept and that term. And, I hadn't really fleshed out my thoughts and reasoning there. I just had this gut reaction that this is not helpful for men or for society. But I had a lot of conversations, I have to say, particularly with my hairdresser, who I love talking to him. He's a smaller gay man, and he's really smart and really interesting. And last time I saw him, so he challenges me on various ideas. And this one in particular, he said, when he goes to the gym, and this hurt to hear, I'll probably start crying again. When he goes to the gym and lift weights, he's in fantastic shape. But again, he's a little bit smaller. He says he gets sort of low-level bullied from some of the bigger guys in the gym. And he's like, that's toxic masculinity. And it's awful and blah, blah, blah. And I know, and then, the reason I don't like the term is because I feel like it's unfair to men, and it suggests that masculinity itself is toxic. And that is just not the case. Of course, the extremes, the negative sort of extremes of masculine behavior are something we need to deal with, obviously, but that's not sort of the average guy. So I guess what I really haven't talked about explicitly is sort of engaged about that concept. And I've gotten a lot of feedback about my views on toxic masculinity. You know, I have a 12-year-old son. He picks up that stuff kind of from the environment. And I've heard from a lot of men who appreciate and feel validated by that view. And they find it, I think, comforting and kind of a relief. The view that I have that this term isn't helpful, that it's kind of damaging and alienating potentially to men who we want to bring, into the, use the positive aspects of masculinity, I guess, and cooperate with men to try to solve some of the problems we face, obviously. And so I don't think using terms that alienates men or makes them feel ashamed is helpful. But again, I'm open to alternative viewpoints. So I've heard from a bunch of men who really are thanking me for expressing those views. And I heard from probably 2 or 3 women who very clearly articulated and with respect challenged me on that view. And they sort of articulated the same thing that my hairdresser articulated, was that this is a useful term. It describes something real. So this is something that has been really interesting for me during the course of these conversations.
What you described with your hairdresser in the gym, that low level bullying, I guess, what is that composed of? Shaming, belittling.
For him not living up to their standard of masculinity, which is like the big, strong, tough guy, I guess.
Yeah.
And another view that I hold very strongly is that masculinity should encompass all kinds of different ways of being a man. I think that's really important.
In one section of your book, you speak about hierarchies, and I just read this morning, so I might be misremembering this section. You say that there's something about testosterone that causes men to actually become more in sync with the hierarchy in a way that it kind of plugs them in even more to a dominance hierarchy.
First of all, I wouldn't say cause, and this is a difficult area. It's sort of you getting into philosophy, and I think saying that testosterone, I fight about this with my husband actually, because he is a philosopher, saying that it causes any particular behavior. I have a problem with that, because it by itself doesn't cause anything. It increases the likelihood of a particular behavior given certain environmental circumstances or stimuli. So it would say lower the bar for physical aggression relative to a woman in the same environment, right? So a person with a male typical level of testosterone that they've been exposed to in utero, in puberty, and in adulthood, that will reduce the
disinhibit
intensity of the stimuli that are necessary to kind of provoke a physically aggressive response. Okay, so that's just my explanation about why I think cause is sort of challenging term for that. But your question is about hierarchy, and it's clear, the evidence is pretty clear in non-human animals that a male typical level, again, it's lifetime exposure to male typical levels of testosterone. And that's important because the prenatal exposure turns out to be incredibly important in predicting the effects of adult male levels of testosterone. So you kind of have
it sets
to
the
have
stage.
That. Yes. And that's important. And it also shapes childhood behavior, which of course also shapes adult behavior. So the hierarchy, it's really, and again, there's not really hard data here. This is something that's very hard to operationalize in humans because we exist in so many different social
games,
environments, right? You have your bus driver thing, you have your family thing, you have your basketball court thing. So there's all these different kinds of hierarchies. So it is difficult, but what seems to be the case based a lot on non-human animals, but also just looking at sex differences in humans, is that men are much more attuned to signals of status, attuned to and responsive to. So in the environment, those signals are much more salient to men than they are to women. It's not always the case that high testosterone is going to motivate a man to seek higher status, because a lot of men know that that's really not going to be possible for them. And they just may use other strategies to try to basically find mates, have sex, whatever, or gain resources like money. You know, they might use other strategies than trying to compete with other men for social status. And I just want to say, what's interesting is if you think about what is salient to you in your environment, like if you're just walking down the street. So for me, and this is true for many women, if somebody walks by with a baby, like I personally, I'm just like, that's like a magnet for me. I love babies. I loved being pregnant. I loved, having my little baby son. And when I see other people with a baby, especially a little newborn, it's like, oh my God, I want to go over and look at it and coo at it and have it look at me and investigate it. And my attention is just drawn to that. This is very stereotypical. So this isn't, this doesn't happen for everyone. I'm not saying all women are built to be nurturers. All women are built to be nurturers. However, this is a very common response. For men, a woman with huge boobs is going to, or even large boobs or a sexy body or whatever it is, draw his attention in a way a baby may not. Those are just differences on average. Women may check out other women, but it's usually because they're competing with the other women or seeing what she's got versus, and comparing them to themselves or whatever. So there's different elements of the environment that are salient to us. And it's my feeling here, and there's some indirect kind of evidence to back this up, that testosterone does have this effect of influencing what is salient to us in the environment and affecting what our priorities are in terms of reacting to various kinds of stimuli, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yes, I think men are much more concerned with status and striving for social status because reproductively over evolutionary history, that's made much more of a difference for male reproduction than for female reproduction. It's still important for women, but they compete in different ways that aren't physical, et cetera. And status just isn't quite as important reproductively. There
is just the idea that you gave me about kind of like a symmetry or but an opposite between the sexes. It might not be the case, and I think that we can just say once and for all that we're going to venture into the world of stereotypes. We're just making we're not saying that anybody has to do anything or be any way, which is, we could have a whole conversation on why we have to say that. Why is that not just assumed anymore? But when you brought up a woman checking out another woman to size her up, that made me think kind of a version that we wouldn't call toxic femininity, but women, especially young women, being really down on themselves.
Yes.
And that is a form of toxicity, and that might be a part of her evolutionary makeup, to be driven to... I remember my sister, she would start bawling randomly during her puberty, it was always kind of weird. She's like, and she wouldn't even know sometimes, like, I don't know why I'm crying, I'm just crying. But one time she got really upset because we were watching some Noxema commercial, or, you know, there's this model, and she the model with
had
the really
perfect
round
skin.
face and and she just started crying, and my dad's like, well, why are you crying? It's like, well, I'll never be that pretty. I'll never be that beautiful. And whereas she was directing that inward, a man, like what you were describing in the gym, they kind of direct it outward. Like, you're not good enough. You're not good enough. You're not good enough. And then they kind of check each other. You know, if that forms a positive feedback loop, that bullying might help
really interesting.
Certain men build themselves up, but also with regard to your hairdresser, he's not incentivized by that behavior to make himself better. It makes him feel worse. Maybe.
Yes. No, there was so much in what you just said. So one thing, I just want to go back to my example, because that wasn't a great example of men being concerned with status. It's just an example of attending to different things in your environment. And I should have just closed that loop by saying that men do seem to be more sensitive to signals from other men. In terms of like eye contact, tone of voice, interrupting, you know, this isn't conscious, body size, potential strength. All those are, you know, signals of status that men seem to be more attuned to than women. But what you're talking about with women is something that I've been thinking about also in terms of the sort of flip side of something like toxic masculinity. It's like, why don't we have a term then? If we're going to have toxic masculinity, women can be absolutely horrible to each other, especially online now, so the way that women denigrate each other is different from what men do. Men will tend more often to do it face to face. You can go up and insult a man right to his face, or punch him, or say, hey, you've gained some weight, or whatever, but it's direct. And you can respond, and then you can reestablish your hierarchy. And men are able to resolve conflicts more quickly and effectively than women are, because I think that there are some sort of rules associated with status. Women have a lot of trouble with that, but they can't respond to their attacker the way that men can respond to their attacker. Because a lot of the time women don't know who started this rumor about me that I slept with 10 guys in the last week, or whatever it is. You don't know who wrote on Facebook, who made fun of the way my hair or body weight, or whatever it is on Facebook. And that is pernicious. And there's so much damage being done, and so much insecurity about appearance, or whatever it is, reputation. And there's a lot of research on the evolutionary origins of these sex differences in style of aggression. But what we see happening socially now is that women, or girls, some of them are committing suicide over having their reputations denigrated, or being low-level bullied in real life in this what tends to be a passive way. You know, it's incredibly painful. And that seems like toxic behavior, but we're not making a big deal out of toxic femininity. So I don't think we should have toxic femininity or toxic masculinity. We should talk about the behaviors and what they mean, and maybe they are more likely to be engaged in by one sex or the other, but they're not exclusive to that sex, and they're not committed by all members of either sex. I guess that's my issue.
Just to bring up more stupid internet drama, I think it was yesterday, one YouTuber went after Joe Rogan, and he just dug into a very big YouTuber, went after the biggest YouTuber.
Oh, I think I saw this on Twitter. I think was this also on
Ethan
this guy
Klein,
has like a million. Yeah. No,
there's pictures of him in
Twitter
diapers. Today. He's a tubby little guy. It's just kind of funny that he, in attacking Joe, and this has happened with Joe. Joe's interesting. You see a lot of this status going after Joe. A lot of people go after Joe because he's big, and you always know that it's actually the insecurity that's driving specifically men to go after him online instead of like going up to Joe and saying, you're a weak piece of crap and you're spreading misinformation and you need to shut your trap. Like, who's going to win in that situation? Would you do that in person?
Yeah.
Would you do that?
Would you say that in person?
So, there's the derogatory way of describing that behavior coming from a man would say that's a bitch move to do that, to not like actually man
that's
up.
Interesting.
Yeah. Right?
But it being a bitch move means you're a pussy for using a bitch move. Yeah. You're less than. You're not masculine enough to do it face to face, basically.
Yeah. But without the structure, without an honor structure, regulating a man's dignity, then those terms don't really mean anything. And I wonder if you could erect a honor culture or dignity that's specifically geared for men to lift them above their nature, that wouldn't use the feminine as a derogatory term, or to cast certain strategies as less than, and then assign them some sort of female characteristic like backstabbing or going behind one's back or spreading rumors and stuff like that.
So you're using the term honor culture. Are you talking about the South? Like, are you using that term for what it means in terms of upholding certain standards of behavior and punishing those who don't uphold those standards, like politeness in the South, that, it's characterized as an honor culture?
Mm-hmm. I wasn't using it technically, but I was just using that as a stand-in for some sort of manly virtues. Right? Like, what would those be based on? Honor, dignity. We could go through all the different things, but without some sort of society saying you're less than if you act this way. There's no disincentive for somebody to go after Joe Rogan indirectly online, and kind of act that way and not like, so-called man up and do it direct face to face, but rather
I have to say I do feel like there's some but I do feel like confronting someone face to face, if that is the manly way, I'd far prefer that than someone using passive aggression, which women are more likely to use. I think that's much more damaging because you can't respond directly. So I agree with what you're saying, but I still think that while male aggression, the extremes of male aggression are, obviously bad, but I think that style of confrontation, that sort of more masculine style of confrontation that is more direct, is much better than a passive form of aggression where you can't respond. That is so damaging.
What are some of the theories that you are attracted to or that you know of that explain why the female aggression would have developed in the way that it has, to use indirect methods of like gossip and things that you've brought up?
So it's in line with the larger theory of why males are just more physically aggressive across, and tend to be, across the animal kingdom and in humans, where, obviously males have a larger body size and much more strength and power, and can gain greater reproductive benefits from physical aggression than women can. Women are positively, on average, harmed by risking their health, because that is a health and long life. They need, the longer their reproductive career and the healthier they are, on average, the higher their reproductive success will be, over evolutionary history. Today, of course, we live in very different environments and there's birth control, but that is the dominant explanation for these differences, not just in how we compete with each other, but in all kinds of areas. That women tend to be more physically cautious than men. And they're good. I think those are very, very strong evolutionary explanations there. Mm-hmm.
And then also thinking more strategically, more strategically over the long term, because of the influence of the the amount of resources that need to be poured into the creation of a baby causes a woman to be a little bit more choosy and therefore have a little bit more higher cognitive function earlier than males. I see a lot of, in my experience with children.
Wait, sorry, what do you mean higher cognitive function earlier?
Yeah, thank you. In my 20 years or so working with children, it tends to be the case that females are more verbally acute quicker and are they become social and they start playing social games pretty cleverly, a lot quicker than the boys tend to do.
Smaller groups. I mean, that is one difference. They usually don't play, and the group size for girls tends to be much smaller than for boys. So they do have fewer moving parts to kind of keep track of. But yes.
And so they establish deeper relationships because it's not as big
it depends what you mean by deep. I think men establish incredibly deep relationships, but they're not as they don't rely on language as much as girls' relationships tend to.
And then when we're translating our society into a more or less purely language-based kind of interaction, let's just say Twitter, which, it's mixed media, but it's mostly language. It's mostly verbal. You can't really get far on Twitter itself without having some sort of verbal acuity. And then also all the relationships are formed through basically this hive mind DM culture. So it's all language. And what I found very fascinating, especially once I started this gender journey that I'm on and that you're a part of now with this series, is that I've interacted and attracted a lot of women, and by attracted I just mean attention. Just basically, they see the work I'm doing, and I'm actually doing a lot of.
You mean gender critical women?
Gender critical women, post-feminist, post-gender critical feminists. Okay. Just a lot of just women who identify as feminists, and women who staunchly reject ideological feminism, at least Christian women and stuff like that. But I just notice it's fascinating to me, and I don't mean that condescendingly, to watch this female kind of society, or this female group, especially with feminism, is very about women, by women, for women. So you have their behaviors, just they manifest certain tendencies, and by getting in trouble with them periodically, you see how I violate certain codes, and figuring out what the codes are and why they make sense that I should be punished, reputationally, or being blocked or whatever, because I said something wrong, or I used the wrong word, or I used a word that could be construed in another context as derogatory to women, like a pun that I did could be harmful. Yeah. It's really interesting to navigate the social environment, one, because it is virtual.
Of sort of getting into the women's social.
With women, with women's social environment. Have you had interactions with that, and have you kind of seen in your translation? I don't know how online you are.
A little bit. Yeah. So I should just say, first of all, I don't think that's condescending in the slightest. Like, I'm completely fascinated with male behavior because I'm not a man. And I do think you guys are different. And that's basically what my book is about. A lot of women, what's been very interesting is some feminists who I really respect and love their work. Julie Bindel was one of them. Her view is much more of a social constructionist view of sex differences, but otherwise we share the same feminist goals in terms of, eradicating sexual violence, for instance. But she actually read my book and softened her view there. And was open to really reconsidering the importance of biology. But I think her prior view was that of many feminists, which I have a problem with, because many feminists resist biological explanations because they suggest that this is natural, and that, sort of the most extreme aspects of, like, sexual assaults or serious physical aggression, or patriarchy even, by a biological point of view, can seem to suggest that this is natural, that there's nothing we can do about it. It's good because it's natural, etc. So I think many of them oppose that particular viewpoint. So that's an issue for me in engaging with some of those feminists. But what's interesting is when people start to change their viewpoints, and that happened a bit with Julie, and that was amazing. That was one of the best things for me to hear about that happened as a result of just talking about my book and writing the book. Because she's the kind of person I wanted to, she, first of all, I have huge respect for what she's doing. She's actually going around the world. I'm getting teary. She's working, she's devoted her life to
raising women up.
What is meaningful to her, which is protecting women's safety, basically from the threat of many males, which she's done work in Africa. I lived in Africa for a while. There's incredibly, there's just horrific kinds of male on female violence that is rampant in other cultures. In particular, of course, we have our issues with that here in Western cultures, but she's really in it, and she's done a lot of writing and a lot of research and a lot of field work, basically. So that was meaningful to me because I have part of, I think, what motivated me to write the book. And I don't call myself a feminist. I don't really have any labels. But I was irked and felt that by the resistance among feminists to biological explanations for sex differences, partly because I think if you want to advance feminist goals, you have got to understand what is going on. And you are limiting your ability to do that when you, by default, privilege one kind of explanation over another. And so for somebody like her to say, wait a minute, I'm reconsidering my views, that's like, I accomplished my goal there. That was a really big deal. But your initial question was whether on Twitter, I think, or elsewhere, the kind of work that I'm trying to do and the language that I use to communicate it can ever be or has been kind of misinterpreted, or have I made missteps that have really pissed people off? And totally. So I've made actual missteps that have pissed people off, and then sort of reconsidered, apologized, and tried to reframe. But I've also just really pissed people off by saying things that I completely believe and will not take back. So yeah, I've pissed people off for different reasons. I don't know what you were asking exactly.
That so-called cancel culture, I don't know if we're allowed to use that phrase anymore. Do we have to come up with another one, or can we just
I think
use that?
Probably should. Because it's not about what I've been through. It's not really about canceling. It's about harming. It's about making somebody's life so difficult that they hide, or they hide their views. And it's not, of course, for the person whose life has been made difficult, that can be excruciating. But the effect is, of course, on the people who observe what's happening to that person who has been, I will say, abused. So,
and being put in that position or being abused in that way, I've seen, and I've covered a lot of similar story arcs, people going through similar things.
Yeah.
It tends to actually describe something about the ideology that's being protected, or it not only describes the group behavior, but does it give insight into why they would try to harm you, to stop you from saying certain things?
When you say the group behavior, what do you mean the people who kind of oppose what I'm trying to do or say?
Okay, so if you, in your specific instance, go on to Fox News, that's one red flag, okay, which goes, then you're embattled in the Fox versus CNN NPC war, which I don't really care so much as the going on Fox News, and then saying male and female are important categories for science. And that is something that you've said and gotten into trouble. To be fair, I didn't only say these are important categories for science. I said that, and I don't want to, get into the whole what exactly is male and female thing, but I said these are important categories. Here's how we can define sex across, many, all basically species that are sexually reproducing.
And I said, but the ideology seems to be that how one feels about one's sex is more important than the scientific facts, something like that. And then I also said, but these facts of biology don't prevent us from treating everyone with respect and people expressing their gender however they see fit, using their preferred pronouns, etc. So a mission that I am on is to try, and this has to do with the conversation about the way that some people are resisting scientific facts, in my view, to promote a particular social agenda. So I think the resistance that has come at me, much of it from trans women and their allies and from trans rights activists, is that I'm not endorsing a particular interpretation of science or a particular viewpoint that I think some members of that particular group would like to advance because it seems as though it's going to help their cause. And so I'm not angry about that because I get it, and I can see why people would do whatever they think is going to work. And maybe they actually think that sex is on a spectrum, or it's not really something that is real biologically, or it is something that's real, but it's in your head. So I don't know what they're thinking exactly, but I do really want to push back against this trend that we're in now, that I think is just sucking something out of us. I don't know. I find it very, very disturbing that people don't trust science and scientists and medicine anymore, partly because of the takeover of language, which is something I'm trying to resist. And I do think we need to make the point that we can achieve our social goals and improve, work towards the causes that we believe in, that transgender people should live lives free of abuse and have, all the rights to healthcare that they need and just be able to go do what they want, basically. And that we can work on, violence. We can work on all of these goals and make the most progress possible by sticking to facts and logic, and having compassion and listening to each other. That's so important to me. But it is difficult to try and advance that cause in a way that I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want to offend anyone, but sometimes I feel like that is going to be a side effect of what I'm trying to do. And I'm trying to do it in a way, that is scientifically accurate, but also compassionate. And sometimes, I don't do a perfect job there. So that's where there's just been a lot of blowback in my personal life, or in my professional life, but not in terms of the responses that I'm getting from, social media or emails I'm getting from people who are overwhelmingly supportive and, love what I'm doing and saying, and it's very meaningful to them in a positive way. It's just that I think when you're in a academic institution, there's a different set of values and norms overall. So that's been difficult.
I just read today that the DSM-5 is adopting the new terminology, and they're phasing out gender dysphoria and they're replacing it, and then they're replacing all these different terms. So
are they using sex assigned at birth rather than
assigned
sex?
at birth instead of male and female, and then also it's gender affirmation surgery or something along that line. So
I just feel they should use neutral scientific terms there, but
the language is difficult. It's an odd turn where it seems like every once in a while we get a break from this and then we go back into this, where you get in trouble for having for speaking about certain truths or certain realities. And if your book came out 30 years ago, you'd be in hot water with another group, right?
Or just no one would care about what I wrote. I don't know. Who would I be in hot water with 30 years ago, I wonder.
Well, you're arguing in the book against social constructivist-ish feminism, or you bring up you kind of
No, that's
you
right.
argue against certain feminist takes about social versus nature formation.
Right.
And if you
because I don't think there is a nature versus nurture argument, argument to be had.
And so if you are going about this project and sticking to the truth and withstanding the slings and arrows of vicious activist groups, and
I don't think I'm withstanding. I haven't done a good job withstanding.
Well, how are there? Would you mind speaking to the realizations or the adaptations you've had to make to stick to your principles and stay?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. Stay what? Honest?
Stay above water and stay.
What do you mean above water?
Stay true to yourself, but also stay within an operating framework where you're still able to go about your life and go forward.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So the first question was, how do I stay true to myself? Or
how have you learned over the, receiving?
Okay, I don't have to learn that. That's just the way that I am.
Always?
Yes. I think I was that way from the get-go. I guess so over the years, I think I have learned that it comes naturally to me, but I've also learned that I can lean into that, I guess. What is that noise? Sorry, there's some weird noise outside. I do think that, so I appreciate it when people are honest with me. I'd rather know how other people feel. I'd rather have facts. So I feel like I'm doing other people a disservice if I'm not being honest about what I think or what I feel. I feel like I'm actually robbing them of something, of reality. And it seems manipulative to me if you're not honest and straightforward. And that to me is just saves energy. It's just easier. It seems like it takes a lot of energy to misrepresent what you think or feel. I do need to learn to not always say what I think. That's something I always have to watch for. So other people might have to try to be themselves and be honest. I have to constantly try not to say everything, that I think. So that's important. And that's
good thing you married a philosopher then, huh?
Now, why is that? Because tell me why that is.
He can take it and he can process, and you guys can co-process.
Yeah, no, he likes to argue. He likes to get into things. So no, I think that might be true. But then the second thing, I haven't stayed above water. I mean, I've had and I'm not, I just want to say that I'm not trying to paint myself as a victim. I'm painting myself as a psychologically complex person like everybody else. I have a history with depression, and has been devastating to give most of my adult life to my work and then to feel attacked by people who I feel like I've given so much to. And I'm saying people instead. I have been saying the institution, an institution, but it's people. I'm sort of now realizing, no, it's not an institution really. It's just a bunch of people. So that's been very, very difficult for me. And it might not be so difficult for somebody else. It's difficult for me because of whatever my own, history is or current stressors are. But the point is that it's not just canceling. And I think that when you say cancel culture, that really that can be a damaging part, professionally say. And that has been damaging professionally for me. But it's really more, it just sucks and hurts. And it's people who you might have trusted, say, or done a lot for, or thought were your friends who wouldn't care more about their reputation than they do about doing what's right or about your friendship or whatever. But that's kind of my experience here. And that is extremely, I feel that I've been naive, and now I'm kind of seeing how the sausage is made. And I don't know why I hadn't seen that clearly before. But that's been very difficult.
At some point you had a crisis of faith in the institution of academia.
I'm in the midst of a crisis of faith. It's so not just academia. It's also, I have to say, it's Harvard. That I've been working so hard for so long that now that I have taken a bit of a break from teaching and advising and writing, and I just took a few weeks, but now I'm sort of seeing things I didn't have time to even see or consider before. And
it sounds like you've begun to make a distinction between the institution of Harvard and then the people, this bunch of people, or even maybe even say the culture that you're witnessing.
Yeah, no, that's right. It's a culture, and it's not that individuals are so awful, although I have been hurt, by individuals, but they are caught up in a culture that rewards certain type of behavior. And that's difficult for me because, well, I'm not in their position. I'm not some big shot tenured professor. I'm a lowly lecturer without tenure.
You're kind of a big shot.
Well, but people who have a lot of power within institutions have much farther to fall if their reputations are damaged than I do. I'm lower down on the ladder. I don't have that far to go. So I think I'm an easy victim. I think women are more likely to be attacked around these issues. But I had sort of expected that the people with power who know that I've been devoted to this particular institution and done it, given a lot to it, that those people be in a position to protect me or advocate for me. But it's in some difficult cases, it's been the opposite. And that's what's kind of devastating, because those are people, those are your relationships. Now I'm just having to figure out how to navigate that and what kind of changes I need to make.
It sounds like you're early in the process of processing this, but I'm wondering if you can describe the culture, because it might be the case that the culture that you are witnessing harming you, or hurting you at least, is in other places, or it's endemic throughout.
It definitely is. It definitely is. I think each institution is going to, it's going to be implemented a different way. But yeah, of course, I've heard so many stories of people where it's been much, much worse, and you've seen some of that firsthand. And so I think, and that was a while ago, right? So how long ago was the whole Evergreen thing?
Evergreen, we're going to come up on a 5-year anniversary in May. So,
wow.
Yeah,
because it does seem like it's the last 5 or 6 years that things have really been changing.
Do you have?
And it's been hard. I am trying to understand it, and I've been doing a lot of thinking and trying to understand people's behavior from an evolutionary point of view. And I find that fascinating. And it really is, I think, from an evolutionary point of view, reputation within your social group was everything, so important for access to resources, for valued social relationships, for health, for survival. You could be killed or
left for dead,
excommunicated basically for bad behavior. And it's not that everyone observed your bad behavior. It's because there's talk, potentially about your bad behavior where you've broken the social rules. So I do think that we've evolved this really sensitive detection system for that particular kind of social threat. And so for the people who have power, that detection system must be even greater, because they are in an environment where they do have power. They want to retain it. Of course, that's another evolutionarily, I think, shaped aspect of our psychology. So to me, there is, we can make sense of all this. But when it happens to you personally, I was really shocked at how difficult that was. I thought like, I'm going to go on Fox News and I'm going to say what I believe. And I'm sure some people are going to be upset, but blah, blah. But I didn't really understand how it feels when it's your personal relationships.
Can we call this toxic institutionalism or
Yeah.
Okay, so I wonder, do you have any insights? And we can wrap up soon.
Okay.
Do you have any insights about specifically about people witnessing the punishment of those who stray from whatever given ideology it's going to be? But right now it's, for some reason, it's glommed onto sex and gender. And then there's also race is a pretty hot button topic as well. I mean, if you mispronounce a Chinese word in a class and you record it and it sounds like a American bad word, you can, right? So it's just off the rails.
Right.
Are there ways of fostering, let's say, I'm using this slightly facetiously, but hijacking certain evolutionary mechanisms to encourage people to be courageous in this moment?
I mean, this has been one of the most difficult things, is that people, in my view, have not been courageous, on behalf of me. Like, that's something that would have been so meaningful. And it's been so disappointing. Even when it's not just lack of courage, it's lack of doing the right thing. So I know that people are scared. And that's real. This isn't just, people are saying this over and over, but it's real. They are petrified that their reputations will be ruined. And that is serious, or even damaged. The reputation's just being damaged. People feel vulnerable. They're worried about their careers. They're worried about their income, but they are worried about how they're perceived by their graduate students, by their colleagues. That's the life that they live, and those relationships are important. So it's a huge risk to take to support someone who has violated the rules, right?
The ever-changing Byzantine complex purity rules, I'm guessing.
Yes. Okay. So evolutionarily, I think the only thing that will work is for it to come from the top down, for there to be a structure of what the rules are and what the rules should be. So from those at the top to say, this is who we are. This is the kind of institution we are. We believe in academic freedom. We're an educational institution. So we believe that ideas should be evaluated and debated. And that's how we're going to learn about reality, is when ideas are tested, and that requires open discussion and debate. There should be no censorship, and that's not happening. University of Chicago has the Chicago principles, but in general, everybody's capitulating. So I don't know what the answer is, but I do think that it has to come from, ultimately, the rules have to be made explicit, that I just articulated. But what can come from that can be influenced, of course, by donors, by professors, by grad students who believe in what I'm saying and what other people are saying, who do what they can to pressure their administrations, although people are afraid to do that. But if you're some powerful person with tenure, you're not going to lose your reputation by writing an email, I don't think, saying you want some principles of free speech and academic freedom, et cetera, to be implemented and articulated and enforced, so people know what to do when they think someone has said something controversial and harmful and offensive. So people don't know what to do, and they're reacting out of fear, which is just to capitulate. So that's my view.
Without going the whole route of alternative institutions and moving to Austin and starting a new college, finding some sort of square to have these philosophical discussions and biological discussions. You think that there might be rules or protocols that could be circulated?
Standards, norms and standards, yeah.
And those norms have undergone over the past probably 10 years, but rapidly. I mean, we can go back into history about this, but over the last 5 years, they've been implemented by fiat across institution after institution, where the rules are no longer defined, or the rules have gone from truth, like Haidt has argued, they've gone from truth to social justice, or to avoiding of harm, and then the expansion and the swelling of this term harm to encompass anything that violates people's sense of power or sovereignty. It's infinitely gameable. I don't think,
or it's so, but that kind of if enough people say that they are being harmed, then I guess it's the institutional reputation, right, that is under threat. So then the higher ups in the administration capitulate. So that how do you prevent that? How do you prevent that kind of response to that? I suppose it's threat to reputation. I don't know how else to think about it.
Well, you could quantify... Somebody in your position could quantify the harm that you've undergone and then stack it up against the harm that your statement has caused. Maybe we can get Elon Musk to invent an app that could do such a calculation.
But I mean, that's funny. but I don't think harm should be part of the equation, my harm or anybody else's, really.
Oh, okay.
It's okay for me to be harmed. It's okay for people to be harmed by my words. Harmed meaning they felt sad or they felt offended. And
you begin in your book with such an experience of being having a really strong reaction to a scientific paper about
thank you. And I
think and that sort of fly,
scorpion fly, So I was really offended as a graduate student by a discussion of rape that naturalized it. And, I was just starting grad school and I have a history of sexual assault, and I was really angry, and I said that this guy is an asshole, the author of the paper. And I hurt now, even just talking about it, just remembering that, how awful that was to be, or how awkward it felt for me to be in that seminar and feel, why don't other people feel the same way I do? And to feel like invalidated in some way by that paper. This can't be right. Rape can't be natural, because I was raped and it was horrible. But I had to go through that to learn to be a scientist, to learn how to think about facts and theories and hypotheses.
And what pushed you over the edge to say, no, I have to put my feelings
so imagine, so imagine if the professor had, in fact, and I write about this in the book, because if he had stopped the discussion or said, do you need to leave or whatever, if he had kind of indulged my emotionality and tried to comfort me, I'll just say what he did was he kept reorienting me as I was having an emotional response. I wasn't like crying. I was obviously, though, upset. He kept saying to me, what do you make of the argument? What do you make of the thesis presented? What do you make of the research? He had to say it over and over. And I don't know, it finally got to me. And I think, there was another go around of the discussion. When it came back to me, I think I was able to begin to analyze the evidence. And I'm not saying that the tone that someone, I think he used a bad tone in the paper. Like, I don't think it was written with enough sensitivity, but that's a separate issue.
Toxic scorpion fly doctor.
Right. Right. Well, but I would have been patronized. I would have been treated as less than a, competent scientist or competent budding scientist. And in retrospect, I feel that I was respected as someone who was capable of doing what I needed to do, even though in the moment it might have made me feel better to be comforted. it wasn't the place for me to be comforted. I'm in a graduate student seminar talking about science. It's a place for me to learn to engage with the science. And that doesn't mean that we can't be sensitive. You know, undergrads are, I think, somewhat of a different story. We have to be sensitive and cautious, but I think we should expect our students to learn how to engage even with very difficult, challenging viewpoints and not indulge all of their emotional reactions. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's a long way of saying, yeah, sometimes people are going to be hurt and offended. And I think that's something that we should not lean into. That's something we should
build the entire institution around.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. It's an educational institution. That's the point here.
I'm struck by you have such a high sensitivity and emotionality and such a high level of intellect and processing power. And you just seem like somebody who can be in two worlds at the same time and see profound amount of feeling in a thing, or profound amount of empathy, but also can process all these different mechanisms and see the truth and stuff. I'm
thank you for saying that. No, thank you for saying that. And I just want to say that I think the reason I'm attracted to my field is precisely because of my emotionality. It makes me feel, like tearing up all the time. Like it makes me feel a little bit out of control. And I feel like I can have more control through understanding things. And my way that I want to understand things is through science. So I think that I do this because of my emotionality.
And I'm sure that the interplay of those two aspects of you causes the amount of engagement that you are able to elicit going through like endocrine systems and how things plug into things. And you're just a great storyteller too. And I think the storyteller is able to take the information and also take the human aspect, the feeling aspect, and be able to wed that. So.
I'm glad you said that, because in teaching, we're teaching about life. I'm teaching about, the endocrine system, but we all have endocrine systems. They shape who we are. They shape our emotions. It's important in people's lives, and people can have disorders or differences of their endocrine function that profoundly shape who they are, and sometimes ways that are really painful for them. So it's not just science, it's people. And I think, students respond, I think, when you care, when their, instructors care.
So you have this book out. Do you have other resources that people can get in contact with you and feast upon all of your intellectual droppings?
They can visit or experience my droppings. I have a website. I made it, I run it, but I still think it's pretty good. And it's carolehooven.com, and Carole has an E on the end. And then I have Carolehooven.com. And I have a Twitter account, and it's at Hoovlet, Hoovlet. And I did the Hoovlet thing ages ago because I have 3 older brothers. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone else, but I feel like the wee Hoovlet of the family or something. But yeah, that's my online presence, basically.
Have Twitter you recorded any of these seminars or these lectures, or are you planning on doing that? I think.
Oh God, no! I can't. I don't allow them to be.
Oh.
Because we really get into it. I mean, we get into a lot of controversial and personal stuff in there. Okay. And plus, I say all kinds of stuff I would never want the public to hear.
Maybe
but I probably said a lot of it.
Well, here. just like geeking out on car videos. I'm sure that there's a audience that would just absolutely be fascinated and benefit by that. But all in good time.
Okay.
Carole, thank you for joining me on my tiny little show, and it was a pleasure speaking
Benjamin,
with you.
I love your show. I'm a big fan, and you're doing something really different that I don't hear on other podcasts. And it's so, what you do, it's so interesting the way that you, I don't know, engage with people. And I love it. And thank you. And thank you for having me and all the nice things that you just said.
I'm going to stop the recording. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that was an interesting one to choose.
Gender, wider lens.
Okay.
Actually, I haven't heard. And
Sasha and Stella. Sorry. I got confused because I was thinking of Aaron and Aaron, the trans men.
Yeah. In Canada.
They have transparency. Yeah, Sasha and Stella. Okay. Yeah, they're amazing.
Aaron and Aaron are great too.
They're great too. And that was they were just like, you interview us and ask us whatever questions you want. So I dove right in there and I wanted to know what the content of male sexual fantasies was from a woman's point of view. And they said that they started objectifying women once they took testosterone, even before their bodies changed. And they described what that is like. Not because if you grow up as a male, I think it just is like, you don't realize that you're maybe actually objectifying women. But if you grow up, as a female and then transition, you're like, fuck, I don't want to be doing this.
Oh, really?
Focusing on her ass, and it's not all about the relationship. You know what I mean? It's like a whole different way of being in the world. And that's like what one thing I'm really dying to get my head into, like the male head. And there's a whole media kind of genre that excels at doing that. What is that media genre?
It's called pornography. It's on the internet.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's fascinating. It is fascinating.